And welcome back to A.R. Tales, aka the A.R.T. podcast. I am A.R. Mitaban, and today we are joined by Diana Estell, YA fantasy author of The Abyss of the Fallen. Phenomenal title right there. I mean, if it's not pulling you in already, I don't know what is. And this is, I'm gonna have to do a little drum roll for this. The official first debut title of her second book. First time you're hearing it right on this podcast. The Ashes of the Fallen, coming soon. Literally, she had to get permission from her editor and her publishing team right before hitting record. That is how fresh off the presses this is. So without any further ado, Diana, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, and I thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it.
No, honestly, it's all the appreciation is on this end. I just watched that movie Office Space. You know when they're having the scene in the office and they're the guys like saying like, oh, well, thanks for having the meeting, and the other guys are like, oh, no. Yes. The things are over on this side of the table.
Yes.
That just popped into my head right now because it is true. Honestly, I am honored to have you on. I'm glad that we're able to have this conversation. We actually first met on Alex's podcast that we did on Instagram, and you
another
were
great guy.
Another great guy. And we were discussing, authorship and just everything that had to do with creatively. And you were actually in the comment section. And, yes, the energy that you had, it just immediately is something that I wanted to look a little bit further into. And then when I looked at your page on Instagram and saw everything you were doing, I was just enamored, ready to go. I knew I had to get you on the podcast. And now that you're on here,
you're going to make me cry.
It is phenomenal. And, I'm honestly just ready to talk about the book. So without, chewing on too much fat here, what got you started in writing? Was it something that was an early on love? Was it something that you developed later on in life?
I think it's a combination of both. So I always had little stories in my head as a child. I mean, probably 7 years old. And I would write things down, here and there. Sometimes it was just mishmash words. I would pull out a dictionary. I love dictionaries. And I would always pull, read the dictionaries, create my own words and just little stories. I was the journalist in my family. When we were playing, me and my brothers, we would play like we were newspaper reporters, and I was always the one doing the journaling on the old typewriter, and I had to have the pencil in my ear, So I think it started
with like the notepad like sticking out of it.
The whole nine, the whole nine. But so I always had a deep love of words. I think that's the thing. And then I became a voracious reader, and then I think as I got older, just going through some family hardships, I kind of put that side of me behind, but dreams are never really lost. They may be deferred, they may be held back, but they're never really lost. So I think my childhood and my adulthood kind of met and became friends again.
And
that makes any sense.
No, it doesn't make any sense. I actually had to, the first time I ever done that on the podcast, I actually had to write down something that you said, deep love of words. That in its essence, even just like if you think about it just in the structure of writing itself, it's one of those things that's what I love about writing. I don't think anybody that's even read a book, much less wrote one, can disagree with that. It's a simple idea. It's like, deep love of words, that's how it goes. But it wasn't until you said it in that cadence, using those words, using your thoughts, that it transferred into a larger idea. And I think that's what writing is in essence. When you read these amazing books, the things that the lines that take you back aren't like these crazy, concepts that are inalienable to you. It's something that you understand, but you just never heard about it in those words. That's why we love quotes, because quotes they're not adding any new information that you don't know. I'm pretty sure everybody can understand to be nice to people and don't be a jerk.
Right.
But it's when you put it in a certain phrase, it's like, oh yeah, you know what? Good point. Well said.
Right. Thank you.
Well, I just love that whole idea that you're doing, especially the merging of your childhood and your adulthood, because I think well, first of all, YA fantasy. So you're writing for a younger audience here, and that in itself. But then fantasy in itself, obviously, is indicative of wild imagination. So how were you able to branch those two ideas? And again, even the whole thing about the fantasy, I love that. I personally played in Chicago. Like in Chicago, I played the reporter. Like when we did the play, like in Boys and Girls Club. So I'm right there with you. I was doing all those stuff as a child, and again, that's why I love the idea, like deep love of words. Like, yeah, I've always had that. Now I want to have like a shirt that says that.
Yeah, hey, me too. We should.
We'll work on it together. We'll split profits.
Yes, love of words. So can you repeat the question again? I'm so sorry.
So the question is, how did you branch together those ideas of the adulthood and childhood? So like, the whole idea of fantasy is very imaginative. How did you branch those two ideas?
I always liked dragons. I don't know why and where necessarily. It may have been, I don't really know why, but I always say that my parents wouldn't buy me a dragon, which is akin to child abuse. And so I just started writing about it. But I think it really started taking off after Star Wars. When I watched Star Wars, and I'm going to date myself, but I was 10 when that movie came out. When the first movie came out. And after that, I was just jettisoned into whatever, my teachers, tried to pull me down a little bit. I don't mean like emotionally, but just to kind of stay right here and focus. But that just never leaves you. And then of course The Hobbit, and it just goes on. And I was just and then my just natural imagination which was kind of woven into those fabrics that has never left. And when I started writing my book, I really didn't set out to write fantasy. I think I forgot about that part of my life. I mean, I wouldn't say I forgot about that part of my life. I would read it, but I totally forgot that essence was in there, because there was that point where I just kind of stopped thinking about writing, being a mother and, going to college. And so, but then when I started writing for my daughters, I started writing a book for them. It became fantasy real quick. And looking back, it's no wonder. It was always there. It just never left me. I thought it did, but it never left me.
Now, the thing that I love the most about specifically fantasy is the way that a person conveys their story is very indicative of the things they're interested in, right?
Right.
So the whole thing about fantasy is that, like, even not even just fantasy, about putting together and creating any story, is that there's a vantage point in which you go off from, right?
Right.
So you have a love for dragons. What other elements do you incorporate? Elements of drama, elements of suspension, tension, and comic relief, action. What other subgenres do you throw into your books, and how are they influenced by the things that you yourself love?
Well, I hate to say this, I never really knew much about a lot of the just talked about, except fantasy and whatnot. I mean, I literally had no formal training in writing. I mean, I've had some writing classes here and there per the degree, but I mean, not really. And so when I sat down, things started filtering through, and it had to be, of course, your life. You kind of write what you know, even if your soul is speaking to you, you don't know yet how to put it into words. So I started writing about, I love history. I'm a ferocious history absorber, if you will. I have a degree in anthropology, so I love, worlds. I was in D&D. I always loved D&D, so there goes that part. And then I love art. I have a minor in Japanese art. And so I've always been, my dad was a visual artist, and so I kind of grew up in that world. So I think when you take some of those things, and then of course your childhood and your, plays into it, it's things just, I don't know if there's even a formula. Things just get, maybe in classes they can tell you this formula, but they just somehow they get woven into a story with characters that don't exist, but they feel like they really exist, And I don't know if I answered your question or if I muddled it.
No. Especially the hints that you're just like giving me, because the main question was like trying to delve into how your interests form your stories, and you just told me a whole host of D&D, I remember
Yeah.
even myself, I love just, I mean, even the capability to be able to play Dungeons and Dragons, I think is in itself is a lost art. I mean, that is very indicative of a very imaginative mind. I mean, it's a full board game, but if you let yourself go, it's anything that you want it to be, and you really feel those emotions and the tension. And if you roll a 7 versus an 18, I mean, you feel that tension.
Right. Yes.
And even more, the reason why I really wanted to highlight the D&D specifically is that it's almost like the way that learning the balance from like gymnastics can help you play football. It's like the way that D&D, I mean, again, the entire game is a board game. So it's based on your dungeon master and like just like the general vibe of the group that makes it into whatever it can be, to that takes it to its maximum. So able to diagnose those like hints and elements is what makes a book effective, because the book in itself, it's not a movie. It's not a roller coaster at Universal Studios. It's a text. So if you're able to convey those same emotions and take those same ideas that you learn from Dungeons and Dragons and put them into your book, then I can't imagine how unbelievably amazing the writing would be.
Oh man, and it took such a long time. I mean, anyway, but yes, it's a journey, all right. And sometimes it feels like a roller coaster at Universal.
Oh my God,
a lot of dips.
Well, talk to me a little bit about that. So, we talked about before we hit the record that you love writing. I mean, as you said, it's a deep love of words. So you love writing, even if it's for personal use, that you just write as a flexing of the muscle. So am I wrong in assuming that Abyss of the Fallen isn't your first work? It's just your first published work?
It is my first published work. I do have other ones that I may try to resurrect at some point. Several that I should, I don't know if anyone would want to read them, but yes, this is my first, I would say, professional book. It took a long time to call myself a professional author, or an author in general. It took a long time.
I mean, I hear you. Again, I almost don't even like saying in the podcast anymore, especially like we're at the 100th episode. I've said it like so often, but my background is in engineering, and I remember I didn't feel comfortable calling myself an author until the book was basically published.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And like and again, it is interesting because I remember I would talk about it. I honestly I can't say I talked about it with my peers. I guess I would just have the conversation for myself, if we're being completely honest. Or I would just think, it's like, man, isn't it crazy? Like my freshman year of engineering, when I wasn't even taking like that intensive of classes, I called myself an engineer. I called myself an engineer when I was in high school and I got accepted. But I didn't call myself an author until the book was out and people bought it.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Because I have a degree in anthropologist. I consider myself an archaeologist, anthropologist, even before I graduated with that degree. But there's something about art. I don't know what it is. If it's visual artists, if it's just authors or people, people that write songs. I don't know if it's indicative to arts in general. I don't know what it is, but
I think it's because
common,
I think it may be because it's opinion based. Like if you go to a degree for anything, there's not an opinion that you got a degree on it. It's a yes or no. It's like, yeah, it's either yes or no. You might not be great at it, but you are without a doubt that thing. But it's like,
I think you just hit it. I think you hit that. I think that could be one of the things, because it is opinion based.
But even that, I think that's such a like. Even that, I think it's so like tough to delineate that, because even opinions are all over the place. If you ask the right group of people, it's like, oh, that dude right there, best writer ever. You ask the same group of people on a different day, be like, oh, that dude's the worst. He's the worst. Yeah. How did he ever think that typing was going to work out for him?
Right. Exactly. It's a very interesting thing.
Well, that's the whole beauty of it. I mean, all these things were going through my mind as just you were talking to your publisher. So like I was just like, I can putting myself in your shoes. Imagine me going to school for anthropology with a minor in Japanese art, and traveling the world and being being a cyclist. And then at another point in my life, I'm calling my publisher to see if it's so to ask her about if the title of my book is going to be okay to release on a podcast.
It's very strange reality, very surreal, very surreal.
Yeah, like I've always said that nothing felt, I don't know, solid until I actually held my book. Like just like
I know
when you actually look at your book, it was very emotional. I can't say I can't say I cried, but honestly, like I don't think there's anything wrong with crying. If I cried, I would 100% admit it. But it was just one of those things I just like looked at and just like I was like, wow, like I made this. Like there's like, you know,
it's like I'm an anthropologist. I'm an author.
Yeah, like you just
like
added
the diploma.
Yeah, you just added like a whole new, you know, career, a new title for yourself. It's such an amazing feeling, regardless of opinion based, which is why it's so interesting that like that almost your self identity is based on somebody else's opinion. That's why the whole like thing is like crazy, right?
Yeah, yes, it's geez, and which causes problems.
Yeah,
I mean, and I have never been gifted with the best of self-esteem, so you know, that's not. Yeah, it's a hard business. You know.
Again, I just think it's so interesting because again, especially at being at the, I think there's going to be 103rd episode. Just going through all these things and hearing like people, like different people's journeys and different people's roles and like what they've done in order to get to this point, and just their point of view on like self, basically their identity of self when it comes to this authorship is insane. I know people that still have a full-time job, but when you ask them if they're an author, they're like, oh, without a doubt. Well, I mean, what do you mean? That's like the main thing that I focus on. I know people that only do writing, but if you ask them, they're like, oh, I mean, I guess I'm an author. See, I only have 30 books under my belt, but I mean, you know, I'm not a bestseller yet. It's like, dude, what do you mean?
Exactly. That is really true.
Yeah,
that's really true. So it spans the gamut.
Yeah. Well,
of that.
It makes me all considered because like the reason I ask all these things because you had all this work prior to getting Abyss of the Fallen, but what was that tipping point? What was that feeling that was like when you held this work, when you, or even maybe it was prior to that, maybe when you had the idea of the book, it was like, oh, this is the one. This is the one. I know that I love writing, but this is the one that I know is going to be received well.
Yes, well, I was hoping it would be received well, but I knew I had something at 2010. We were coming home from church, and I remember just literally going up to our room and standing right by that dresser and just thinking about this object. Actually, it's in London, and I went and I started taking. I didn't have a laptop at the time. I didn't. I just used pieces of paper. And my husband went, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I think I got a story here." Okay, you know. And so and these characters just would not leave me alone, to my pleasure and horror. I mean, this is another book in the process where how do characters come to you? So it just started, I would say, it just, whatever, it just never would leave me. I couldn't get my head off of it. These characters would keep popping up. And, to the point where I had to be submissive to the pen and at my peril, I would say, and just really just start writing it. And it wound up being, even if no one ever read my book, even if no one ever published my book, because you don't know, you really don't know. It's like trying to be an athlete and get into a pro team. You have no clue if you're going to be on that team or not. So for whatever reason, you just have to keep going. And I hope it's not for pride, because, there has to be something bone deep in you that has to get the story out. And so this is the story that happened to me. And I can see now why there's so much woven between my childhood and between various aspects of grief, of triumph, and fear, and humor. My dad's not living anymore. He was so funny and a very lovely man, and he would have been very, very proud.
My God.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. I mean, I really sat here, AR, and I just was like, I mean, 2010, 2011, I really remember, and I'm not kidding you, I thought to myself, who's going to want to read my book? You know, stay home mom, because I've been blessed to be a stay home mom, so I'm not knocking, I'm just saying that's what I felt. You know, who's going to want to read this book, you know? And my kids were very young at the time, and I felt guilty for writing because I thought I was taking too much of their time. So it took a while to kind of balance. And I'm probably jumping ahead of questions, so I apologize.
Oh,
but
no,
I
no.
mean, it took a while for me to not only understand I had a story or believe I had a story, but to allow myself to write this story and to be able to learn how to migrate, being a wife, being a mother, being a friend, and then being a writer, you know, because the writing is very obsessive, and I can dive in it. And I've apologized to my kids numerous times, you know, for hopefully them not, you know, not eating up their time. And of course, they assure me I haven't, but you know, those sort of things that, and maybe it's addictive to parents. I don't know if it's, you know, you know, but then eventually I was able to kind of put that I was okay to be a writer. Now, calling myself a writer took a long process. I'm still not, I'm in that process. I would say I could call myself a writer, but sometimes I catch myself going, oh yeah, I write books, you know? So,
My God.
and then, yeah, so I don't want to keep jumping ahead, but.
No, you're great. Cause all I'm thinking about is like how powerful of a tool, well, I mean, how powerful of a force really doubt is. Cause I'm comparing it to my journey. And I remember when I got my first idea, it was while I was in my 4th year of my 5-year program in engineering. And I remember when I would tell my friends, I would tell like my family members, and the thing that like made me like not want to push it, you know, to the extent I want, you know, if it wasn't for my obsessiveness, you know, the thing that didn't make me immediately go like, oh, I should turn this into a book, was that I mean, to this day, and I'm not knocking my family. I'm very close to my family, and I very much love my family, but there's no one in my immediate family, you know, brothers, sisters, you know, a couple uncles, a couple of cousins have read it, but my brother, sister, mother have not read the book. And at first it's like things that like hurts your feelings, right? Like if I was having a conversation, somebody tells you like, it's like, oh, your own brother, your own sister hasn't read your book. But what I've understood, and what I understood now, and that's why I didn't understand about the whole writing game, is that opinions are such a thing. They're not into like they weren't created, you know, to love sci-fi fantasy the way that I do. That's not their fault. And that right there is the reason why I didn't want to, because I had the same thought that you did. Who's going to want to read my book? And the reason why is because I was looking at the wrong sample size. Understand? It's like I wasn't considering the world ahead of me that likes a whole bunch of weird stuff. There is a million plus community of grown men that dress themselves as werewolves, essentially, and dance about. And there is nothing wrong with that. Trust me. There is nothing wrong with that. I'm sure they are great people that with loving families.
I know people like that.
Exactly. God bless them, genuinely. But that's what I'm saying, is that you don't like, the people's interests are all over the place. And to say that like we're a niche, what is niche to a population of 8 billion people? What is niche? 1% is still millions.
Right. Honestly. Yeah. Well, I totally understand. I mean, my youngest daughter is reading, getting through it. I would say getting through it, but my husband hasn't read it. I mean, it's not knocking him down. I love them all. And, you know, my oldest one, I mean, she's so busy in college, and my husband made a good point. You know, they lived through this process. And, you know, they all heard. I mean, I used to tell everybody, oh, I'm writing this thing. And I probably shut it way too much. But, you know, they lived with it. You know, my kids grew up with Dagon and Mary and Sevilla and all these characters, you know, and then really none of them, I mean, my youngest one more so, but the other one, my husband and my oldest daughter, this is not their genre. I mean, it's not what they would wrap their brain up, but it was pretty, I'm like, because I have literally had people say, wait a minute, you haven't read your own wife's work? You haven't read your own mother's work? And, you know, and then I'm like, yeah, you haven't read my own work yet, but there's something to be said for that, and to kind of give them some grace. I mean, they did live with this for a long time. So,
Yeah, I mean, I was watching an interview one time of like it was like an artist that had just won, I think, like 7 or 8 Grammys that year. And then they were on Jimmy Fallon, or like, like Jimmy Kimmel. There's a lot of Jimmys out there, but they were some
Jimmy
on,
Carter.
yeah, on some type of talk show, and they were talking. At some point, the host goes like, "Oh, well, I'm sure your father's very proud." He goes like, "Oh, my father actually hasn't listened to the album," and obviously the entire crowd goes, right. But then I started thinking back. I'm like, wait a minute. Well, now, why would a 7-year-old person, which is assuming the age of his father, be into the type of rap that this person's making in his 20s? It doesn't math out, right? It's one of those things that at first it hurts your feelings, but when you actually think about interest, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. He'd be listening to jazz or like, whatever.
Right. Yeah, the big
James
bands.
Brown. Yeah. Like, that's his stuff. He's not into rap. Now, if a person's older and they like rap, cool. But like, I don't think that's like the norm that you should expect from people.
No, it's not. I mean, my husband has different interests, and like, God loves them. I love them. And, my kids have different interests, and I'm learning how not to take it personal, because art is just like, I don't know. It's not personal, but
yeah, dude, my mom is she's a very funny individual, and like we have a great relationship, but like I love like my emotions getting played with when I'm watching something. I don't just want to be like made to laugh. Like I want to feel like a range of emotions. Like I want to like get scared, I want to get excitement, I want to have like that heart pumping sensation. And my mom has way too much anxiety for that. I'm telling you, if we watch a cartoon movie and somebody hits like a cartoon hits another one with a frying pan, she's like, oh, no, there's too much violence for me. I don't know why you watch this. That's why you're like this.
And I love action movies. I was bred on. I actually have a martial arts background as well, and so oh my God, that's awesome. So anyway, I grew up with my dad. I was probably the same age as Star Wars, knocking on my door, going, "I'm not kidding. Death wishes on," And I'm 10. Oh, that's awesome. Or Dirty Harry's on. So here I am watching Dirty Harry with my dad, and other action movies. So I don't know. That's just in me now. So
my God.
I have a little bit more, love for the action genre and horror.
Well, that all blends in perfectly into like the next question. So you have this idea. You went to London, you got inspiration, you're back from church, you're by the dresser. You start taking some notepads down, some pens and paper. You start going at it.
Yes.
What does a story take you? Without spoiling too much, what is the general synopsis of the story for the people that are not yet aware? But yes, I'm telling you, the moment you hear this, pick up the book. Let's not be crazy. It is out now on Amazon. You can pick it up right now. Author Diana Estell. You can Google it. Abyss of the Fallen, first book. And there is a second one coming out soon. Yes, you already know. So make sure to pick it up. But without any further ado, what did the story, how did the story branch off from the Genesis idea that you had of it? Genesis idea. Wow. That was a dense word for no reason.
No, that's a good word, actually. Well, it took, I'm just going to lay a little bit of groundwork if I can. So it took about 3 years to create Dagon, the main character. It was half angel, half man.
No, that's
it took a long time. And the girl in my story, Mary, initially, she had no name. She was just the lady. And I knew nothing about her. My oldest daughter asked me, who is she? I said, she's just the lady. And so eventually her story came to me pretty quick. Dagon took a long time. And the reason is because he's so private. He's for better, well, for worse, he's hooked up, and I don't mean emotionally hooked, I mean physically hooked up, but with Sevilla, Satan, for a lack of a better word. And so he loves this mortal girl who he's been looking for. And he has to protect her in his heart and try to block his thoughts so that this evil character doesn't really know what he's trying to do or trying. And so, but the story, the essence of the story is Dagan is trying to save this girl from hell. He doesn't know how, he doesn't know, there's no plan. He's kind of winging it, coming up with things as I'm giving it. Well, he's giving me the information, I would say, so we're both kind of tag team writing it. And that's really his end game. He's very, very, very pragmatic in his love for her. Unfortunately, the Satan character needed something from him and he bit. And this was before he knew he would be in love with this girl. Of course, the Satan character knew. And then after that, unfortunately, it was too late. So he already did it. And now how do you tell somebody I love you by doing you to hell? And so it causes a lot of grief. There is the crux, I think, with him is he's an anti-hero. If you hurt her in any way or think about hurting her, he'll just kill you cold and smoke and let the ashes fall on your body. But he would die for her over and over and over again. I mean, he has this deep love. So for her, that started, and I think this is part of the question you've asked, but those things started melding with, what would you do? What would you do to save somebody, or what would you give to, protect somebody, or, what would you do? And then how far would you go? And being a mother, those are the things that I have asked myself. I mean, I love them. I'd die for any of them, my husband, over and over again. So that took some time to figure out what his end game was. Because as I said, I mean, I know they don't exist, but there's a realness to them in a sense. And it was very, very clear. This is what I want. This is her. It's nothing else. Nothing else. It's not you. It's not the guy down the street. It's not the girl. It's her. And that became very, very emphatic to the point of, it was clear. But that actually took a while. It was a process. I pegged that guy too many times as a totally different character. And if he was real, I could just see him going, oh God, what's wrong with that lady? But once I figured him out, it became pretty evident. And then just to diverge, I don't know if you don't mind, but so he does have all this guilt and all this shame of what he did. I mean, willingly did to humanity, but more specifically, he doesn't give two hangs about humanity right now. It's all for her. So, and so my book does, I think, a deeper service to a mental illness. He suffers with what he doesn't know that yet, but aspects of self-harm, and which in my family, it runs in my family. And so every book has a hotline. That's my biggest thing that I, not my biggest, but it's one of my main points. It was at probably 2012 when I first saw the aspects of what this character was going through, which it shocked me, quite frankly. And then it started making sense. So that's a deep love of mine, is to get a message out for people to get help if they need it.
My God. I mean,
I hope that was okay to.
No, go, no, 100%. I'm just thinking to myself, like, it's almost gonna sound weird, but I'm glad that I have this forum where I can speak to people about this, because just the way that the emotions put together into your thing, it's such a real aspect. I've never heard, somebody put it in that way. That's such a novel idea, what you said,
right,
that it took you 3 years to create a character. I've never heard of that before. But now,
it took a long time.
No, but the thing is that as you say it, I'm realizing that I fully understand what you're talking about. I created a character very similar to, I can't say very similar, but they'll probably be friends in another life, called Haas, and he is just a very, you can almost think about like a Monkey King type of character in like the Chinese
Mm-hmm.
lore, like very playful, but like very serious, determined, all those things. And I added enough to make him like not like simply like two-dimensional and whatnot, but I didn't really understand the character until I was actually going through the plight that he was going through.
Yeah.
So when as the story progressed and like years later on, I added like the elements of like what it took him to get to like a certain point in his life. And as I was like thinking about it, I had just finished college myself. So like the whole idea of like, what we're talking about right now in the beginning of the episode about imposter syndrome, of like the idea of like,
Oh, the
that
imposter
like,
syndrome,
yeah, that we've been told your entire life that, hard work is always going to result in X, but like, what if it doesn't? What about that fear that you can put 100% of yourself into something and sometimes it still doesn't work, like that
right.
true anxiety of like desperation. And more on top of that is that the character itself, he's a faith-based person, not necessarily in a higher power in a religion, but in like in action and things like that. So like the existential crisis that comes out of still failing when like everything was supposed to quote unquote happen in that way. How does the character deal with that? So I wasn't able to like understand that deepness of the character until I went through that years after I had created my own character. So if you think about it, in reality, it also took me a couple of years to get that character to that point, because I only knew him for a little bit. It wasn't until years later that I was actually like, oh, you know what? That's what I'm feeling is what Hollywood would be feeling right now. And like as I was able to understand that is when like characters became so much more in depth. I myself, there is a contemplative suicide scene within my first book. Spoiler alert, but I feel like I've maybe talked about that before. And I had literally, I remember when I wrote that, because I wasn't even in the book originally. When I wrote that section is when I had been going through that myself. So obviously I had a deep connection for that character, but that's because I had went through that experience. It wasn't until that I felt those experiences like for like put myself shooting like the other characters as well that they became richer. So I fully understand that.
Yeah. And that, I hope I know that we're getting better as a society talking about mental illness. But, it's not easy. It's still not, it's not like an icebreaker, right? So I can see now why a character, would, a person, and then a character which you're, bringing to reality, if you will, would have a hard time saying, oh, by the way, I do this, because most people would not want to be like, oh, by the way, I do this,
Yeah. And on top of that, just I can't remember
or I'm
where
suffering with whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can't remember where I read the quote or where I heard the quote, but it was something along the lines of it's hard enough knowing yourself. How you can't be expected to know others. So like that in itself is something else. I mean, the whole thing about mental issues, that you also have to be like aware of your mental issues to be able to tell anybody. Which in reality, I mean, like even that's not even an age thing. That's just like a mental thing. Like you can know yourself at 15, or you could like do the process and know yourself at 15, or you can do the process and learn yourself at 55. Like there is no necessarily, I mean, I'm gonna doubt 15. I can't lie to you. I think you might think you know yourself at 15, but like you're gonna find things out a little bit later. But hey, maybe you do. Maybe you're like really connected to your past lives or something. I don't know, maybe. But everyone has their own process, and it's not a time thing.
No, and he struggles with, so there's, self-harm, there's addiction issues that he struggles with, that he's working through. And therein lies the other aspect, is to have family around you. Not everybody, unfortunately, has people that they can confide in or help them with. And so I was blessed that I had those safety nets in my life. And so Mary is that way to Dagan. It's probably a spoiler, but
no,
but I mean it's also to give hope. We need to have people.
Yeah, no, and again, if you haven't picked up the book yet, make sure to do so. All links are going to be in the bio, in the description, everything. And at the end of the episode, we will have a little thing where she drops her social medias for the people listening, so you can make sure to hop on it immediately. Make sure to do so. Pick up the book. And before we go, because we're rounding out to the end of the episode here, can we give us a little teaser to what is to come for Ashes of the Fallen? and
Phone.
a day if you have if you have
Oh,
a
well,
reference. Is it going to come out next year? It doesn't have to be a day. Is it going to come out next year in 2024?
Probably 2024, I'm guessing. No, today was 2022. I'm so sorry. What's wrong with me? Probably sometime in 2023, I'm guessing. I'm still working on writing I got half of the novel done, so I'm working on it now. The teaser would be, he's still trying to figure things out. He's still living with the Witch of Witches and trying to get out of that, sad situation. And then he's also a rock and roller. You got to have a rock and roller. And so he's, I would say, discovering more or becoming more okay with himself, to show people who he really is. I mean, he's half angel, half man, so he's caught between two realities. He doesn't really feel loved in one place, or he doesn't feel belonged in the other world. And how many people have not felt that? Where do I fit in? Do I fit in here? Do I fit in here? Am I an author? Am I an anthropologist? But so he's still trying to figure things out amongst. There's going to be a new evil person crop up. Terrible. And if Heaven Sevilla isn't bad enough, you have more bad people, just bad. And so, and
Beings,
then
entities.
Yes, that like that. But love then becomes stronger. There is the hope. When evil becomes worse, I made love become stronger. Even if you can't see it, or maybe your friends are telling you about it, but somehow I made a conscious decision. Well, maybe initially it probably wasn't conscious, but I wanted to have love even more powerful, that ultimately darkness cannot quench out the light. And so because everybody has to have hope, you just have to have hope. You have to have hope.
That's an awesome tagline.
We were all
as evil grows, so does love.
Love becomes stronger. Yeah, love is stronger. That's a t-shirt. Well, the t-shirt we have is the first one. Yeah. The love of words.
Love of words.
Words.
Deep love of words. Oh my God.
Deep love of words.
Well, again, this has been a phenomenal chat.
We should do it again.
We definitely need to do it again. There were honestly there's so many points that we didn't even get to cover. We didn't get to talk about Chicago, London, the traveling, how that would affect everything you do with writing.
Exactly.
Cycling, your love of rock and roll, all these things, if you ask me, go together hand in hand, especially you said that you're obsessed with rock and roll. I can't say I'm obsessed with rock and roll, but I'm obsessed with how music changes the dynamic of anything you're watching.
I'm an emo mom. I'm a goth chick. I'm a punk chick. Dagan, without meaning to or trying to, is a lot like Kurt Cobain.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I love grunge. And so, there's just that. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, that's a total side note. But
well, again,
a little bit
it's all teasers for the next episode. We'll have to do it again soon.
Yes.
Thank you again for coming on, especially on such a short notice. And again, just thank you for everything, the support of the podcast, and 100% we are gonna get you back on.
Yes,
mark my words, at least within the next month, because
thank you.
This is way too fun. So again,
exactly,
this is gonna be the end of the podcast. Do you have anything that you want to shout out? Any shout outs? Where can people find you on Instagram, on Twitter? Do you have a website?
Okay. I do have a website. I'll just leave it with that, because I was looking for my links, which I have. I'm sorry about that. It's Diana, Diana, Estell, Estell.com. And there are all the links. Now, the publishing house is working on some distribution issues, because it should be going into Barnes & Noble and other stores across the US. So that is ongoing. Cross their fingers, please, people. It looks like it's going to happen. It's just taking a long time, partially because of COVID. There's just been some lags with COVID. It's out of a lot of people's control. So
yeah. Well, let's pray for a speedy expenditure on that so that I can go out, because I can only imagine. I mean, if you think holding your book is
you're going to be at a signing, man.
Exactly. Imagine. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. You think it's amazing to have you hold your book. Imagine how it's going to be to walk in randomly at a Barnes & Noble. That's the thing, randomly. It's different if you know that's going to be there and you show it specifically, but like imagine just showing up in your PJs or like whatever to go pick up a book and then you see your book there. They'll have to restrain me. They'll have to take me out of the physically. I'll be there all
day. I already told people they're going to hear a scream. I mean, my kids were like, when is that going to happen? I'm like, it's all in God's hands. Whenever it's meant to happen, it'll happen. If not, I'm still blessed.
Still blessed. Great words to leave the listeners on, and honestly, because you definitely are, and you will be blessed yourself if you pick up one of these books. I can guarantee you. Everything that we've talked about, you are in for a ride of emotions, entertainment, and character development.
Yes.
Abyss of the Fallen.
And by the way, you're a great interviewer.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much. So you already know the deal. And by the way, the Instagram is Diana Estell Author. So that's at DianaEstellAuthor. Find her on Instagram. Message her. Don't be a weirdo. Don't send her weird pictures, but definitely comment how awesome of a writer she is. Okay. The internet is weird enough. We should be supporting each other, not creeping each other out. All right.
Yes.
What's the deal?
Thank you.
So again, this is going to be the end of the podcast. I've been A.R. This has been Diana Estell. This has been A.R.'s Tales, aka the A.R.T podcast. We will be back next week with another great interview, another great author, and another person to talk about their passions with. You already know the deal. See you soon. Peace out.